Hi everyone, we'll get started in just a minute. Just wait for everyone to come on.
Just watching those numbers still climb quite quickly. When it slows down, we'll get going in a minute.
Oh, someone's saying we don't have captions enabled. Said anybody had a chance to have a quick look at that? No CC button showing.
Okay. Right. I can see subtitles, but I don't know whether anyone else can. I've just had to turn live transcript on, but I have no idea whether I've just done it for me or whether I've just done it universally.
Oh, Izzy says it's just come on okay. Maybe you've solved it, Alex.
Okay.
We've got, yeah, most people seem to be okay. If anyone struggles, give us a shout.
I just need to go and get rid of the puppy. Just hold on, please.
Okay, Lizzie, we'll let you get going.
Okay, let's get going. Okay, so welcome everybody. So if I can have the next slide, please, and we'll just go through a few bits of housekeeping with you. So we do have live captions today from My Clear Text. So you can turn them on using the CC button option. Hopefully that is working for you all now. We also have BSL interpreters with us today. So Karen and Carol, they will be spotlighted for you during the session. There are also additional captions available at streamtext.net. And the slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet and also on our website. So if you have any technical issues or you do need to leave early, don't worry, you will receive an email in a couple of days' time, which will include the recording, the transcript, and the slides for you to catch up on. Depending on how you join the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. So if you want to ask the panel any questions, just drop those into the Q&A area and wait, and those will be addressed. If there's anything that we don't get to in today's session, we'll do a follow-up blog on our website. And we're also using Slido today for Q&A as well. So there is a QR code that you can scan, or you can go to slido.com and there is the ID, which is 281899 for an anonymous alternative for asking any questions. So we're also going to have a feedback survey that you'll be directed to at the end. It invites you to tell us which featured topics you might like us to cover in our webinars. So please do complete that for us if you have the chance. And now I'm going to hand over to Amy, and she's going to tell you what we're going to be doing today.
Thanks, Lizzie. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Lowe, and I'm the Service Delivery Director at AbilityNet. And for anyone who can't see me, I'm a blonde lady in my mid-40s wearing a blue top today. And just before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about AbilityNet. We're a technology charity, and our vision is a digital world accessible to all. And we work towards this vision via a range of activities. We support individuals to harness technology to achieve their objectives at work, in education, and in day-to-day life. We provide consultancy and training to organisations across all sectors on how to create an inclusive, accessible experience for colleagues and customers. And we've got loads of useful online resources and a busy comms team that produces blogs, events and webinars like the one we're doing today. So thank you so much to everyone for coming along today. We've been really looking forward to this session. Moving on to the next slide. Two of the comments that we often hear from organisations that come to us for support is we don't know what we don't know, and also we're worried about getting it wrong. And today's webinar is all about the importance and value of engaging with lived experience when you're learning about accessibility and inclusion. So really today is going to be a bit of a taster of our upcoming lived experience training series, which is called Don't Disable Me and covers vision, hearing, physical, mental health and neurodiversity. And we're going to be zoning in on the power of storytelling. So digital accessibility and disability and inclusion can feel quite complicated, But as we'll be discussing today, when you start coming at it from a perspective of personal experience, things start to fall into place. And that brings me on to my own personal learning story. And when I say I'm going to tell you my story, it's maybe a little bit of a secret, so please don't tell anyone. But when I started at AbilityNet, I struggled to get my head around digital accessibility. And that must be just over 6 years ago now. And it was the start of a really steep learning curve in my professional life. And I don't think I really even realized it then, but I was joining an organization that was deceptively small, but really complex in the services and activities that we provide. The one thing that stood out for me right from the start was the huge opportunity to make a positive impact. But when you're trying to engage the widest audience, I needed to be able to simplify the messaging to help people understand and listen. But it was complicated. So I set about trying to work out what was what and how it all fitted together. So there were websites and applications. I knew a bit about these. Assistive technologies. These were a bit more mysterious. And there were disabled people and assistive technology users, but neither of these were necessarily linked or mutually exclusive. And again, my knowledge and understanding was pretty basic. There were models of disability. Some were bad, some were good, and everyone seemed to know which and why.
But I'm on mute.
You're not on mute, Alex. There were barriers, many of which I was completely unaware of. There were recommendations and solutions to overcome or remove barriers, many of which I was completely unaware of too. And sometimes when you remove barriers, new barriers were caused by those recommendations to remove barriers, which again came as a bit of a surprise. There were accessible websites that had really poor usability, which was confusing. And there were websites which seemed really usable, but under closer inspection weren't fully accessible. And that was confusing. And there was quite a lot of debate in the sector about what was an accessibility issue over a usability issue and vice versa, which was equally confusing. And sometimes it seemed like a bit of a red herring too. So I reached a point where part of me felt a surge of impostor syndrome, as in, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. Someone else should be doing this that can understand what it all means and take that message forward to make the improvements that are undoubtedly needed. But the other part of me said, I know about people, I know about technology, and I know about how people want to use technology and how transformational it can be when everyone has equal access. I can get my head around the rest of this. I just need to come at it in a slightly different way. So I remembered that I once had a boss who used to say, explain it to me like I'm 3 years old, when he needed to understand something really quickly. So I thought, this might just about help me get there. So I went at it that way. And this was quite an interesting approach, actually, because after an initial funny look, this naturally led to people giving me stories to help me understand. So some of the example stories that I heard included, so this is story 1. There was once a speaker who attended an accessibility event to showcase their product, and the event was attended by a number of people who were blind. The speaker put on a video that was about disability inclusion. However, the video format had no talk track there was no audio description, which left the non-sighted audience members at a complete loss as to what was going on. From their perspective, there was just some music playing and nothing else. At the end, there was an awkward murmuring, the impact of the presentation was lost, and the credibility of the speaker and the product was somewhat compromised, and a good proportion of the audience was completely excluded. The end. Story number 2. Once upon a time, in a land not far away, there was a keyboard-only user who was trying to buy a ticket to a festival. They were very excited as they managed to get into the booking screen quite quickly. They entered their details as quickly as they could because there's a time limit to buy the tickets. And at the very last step, there was a keyboard trap, which meant that by the time they managed to get the darn thing to work, the basket had timed out and the tickets had sold out. They didn't attend the festival. The end. So stories like this really help to make sense of why we all need to prioritise accessibility and disability inclusion in our work and in wider life, because these sorts of stories I've never forgotten and I've retold to other people, just like I'm telling you now. And I think what's really important about it is you see the light bulb go on and people get why accessibility isn't just to do with standards and compliance, but it's really something that affects people. Now, retelling stories is one thing, but they still don't beat firsthand. So I would like to welcome all of our panel. So hi, Alex, Adam and Rena. Let's have some introductions.
Okay, and I'll go first. So thanks for inviting me along, Amy. My name is Alex Barker. I'm 49 and I've worked for AbilityNet for quite a long time, ever since I didn't have grey hair. And I work now as a disability consultant, and I've got a disability, so I don't have all the fingers on my hands. I have a paralysed face, and I have oddly shaped feet. But I need to work. I need to work. I need to do things to get money because I have a mortgage. I have a wife, and I have a little puppy, which they might have heard just earlier. So I'm really sorry.
That's all right.
Gorgeous. But sometimes I find that things that should be simple aren't simple because people put barriers up on, and hopefully through this I can share some of my experiences with good practice and bad practice.
Brilliant. Welcome, Alex. Thanks so much for coming. Rena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Rena. I'm in my mid-20s. I have worked for AbilityNet for 2.5 years, and I work as an accessibility and usability consultant. So I test things like apps and websites against some accessibility guidelines. I've got autism, dyslexia, mental health difficulties, and chronic pain and fatigue. But I'll mainly be putting my perspective forward from kind of neurodiversity, autism and dyslexia point of view.
Fantastic. Welcome, Rena. Thanks so much for coming today. And last but not least, Adam.
Hi there. I'm Adam Tweed. I'm the innovation consultant at AbilityNet. I'm what we would call a pale stale male. So I'm in my mid-40s. I've very little hair, but a lot of stubble, both on my head and on my face. I'm going to be talking largely around mental health. So I have a background in psychology. I have a history of kind of mental health difficulties, and I've recently been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder.
Welcome, Adam, and thanks to everyone for joining today. So we're going to talk around a few questions or topics. And, you know, we've got the Slido and the Q&A going. So if people want to drop in with questions or comments or perhaps sharing their own experiences as we go through, please do feel free to get involved in the discussion. So let's kick off. I talked about barriers earlier on, and you know, it's a word that comes up all the time in our day-to-day work, isn't it? So let's talk about barriers at work and in education. What are the things that get in the way sometimes that perhaps needn't if people have better visibility and understanding of them? Can we go to you first on this one, Rena?
Get my mouse in the right place to unmute. So some of the things that I find are particularly kind of in the way if people don't quite understand, you know, differences in people. One of them is assuming that I work in the same way as others. I can't work in the same way as anyone else can. Yeah, everyone's individual in that sense. Things like I need regular breaks, and if I don't get them, then I can find myself getting bogged down, losing focus. But if I get them, I can work really quickly and efficiently. Also things like instructions. So I've had instances in workplaces before where someone said, oh, can you go do this? I'm like, great, okay, I've never done that before, so what exactly am I supposed to be doing here? If I've not done it before, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. If I've not seen it before, I have even less idea about what I'm going to be doing, and I can't do it then. But getting that additional kind of detail in the instructions of what people want me to do just means that I can get on with it and not waste time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then also around kind of, you know, I'm very good at masking, which is where it tends to be used in the autism community to mean that you kind of hide your kind of autistic traits and you try and appear as like neurotypical, non-autistic as you can. I'm very good at doing that until everything is like way too much, and then I can't do it at all. So I look absolutely fine, and then like 30 seconds later, I could be in a ball crying on the floor, and kind of assuming that if I look fine, I am fine. It can get in the way sometimes.
Yeah, that makes real sense, definitely. And actually, by the time you've got to that point, you know, being able to say stop, you know, can you give me the detail of those instructions? It's gone beyond that, hasn't it?
It's a bit late at that point.
Yeah. And actually having decent detailed instructions is never going to not help someone either, is it? No. So, you know, I think we're all terrible at these sort of vague inferences, you know, saying, oh, it's a bit cold in here, and expecting someone to go and shut the window, whereas, you know, a bit of direct and specific advice is definitely needed.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, how about you, Adam?
Just unmute myself. I think again, for me, it's the assumptions. Just because I might be uncomfortable doing something doesn't mean that I can't do it or I won't do it. Sometimes it is a bit of a nudge to just get me to kind of, you know, to say we need you to do this. I recognize it's part of my job. I don't want people pandering to the fact that I'm experiencing elevated anxiety, that sort of thing. I don't want that to be what defines me and what I can do. And also around that, the kind of assumptions that when I'm feeling quite confident, then maybe physically I'm not showing it. So you could probably tell my voice is starting to waver a little bit because I'm trying to think and talk at the same time and all that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean to say that I'm particularly uncomfortable doing this. I like talking about this sort of thing, but sometimes my kind of physiological processes get in the way, and I can find myself focusing too much on that. and worrying how I'm coming across as opposed to actually getting across the points that I want to make. And the other thing, I think more recently with this recent diagnosis, so as I said, I've had a history of kind of difficulties with mental health, particularly around kind of what I refer to as manic depressive, but we'll go into that a little bit later on, I know. I'm trying now to be a little more honest about how I'm feeling. So it's very easy. I think as Rena was saying there about masking for somebody with a mental health condition, sometimes it can be that you try and not let others know about it. And I've been trying to be a bit more honest, certainly with kind of line management and that sort of thing about how I am actually feeling. But I don't want that, again, to define what I can or can't do during that day. It's just a flag. I'm on a bit of a low at the moment, or I'm having some difficulties. I'm a little bit stressed. So if I'm snapping, then by all means, call me on it. It's just know that there's a reason that I'm doing it.
No, that makes real sense. And I think the more, going back to what Rena said and yourself, the more energy that's being put into masking this stuff, the greater the impact. It's sort of a cycle, isn't it, really? How about you, Alex?
I can agree more with Adam and Rena. I think sometimes if you've got a disability, you have to put more effort into trying to get your point across or trying to make people understand. So, for example, basically my face does not work. I have one fixed expression, whether I'm happy or whether I'm sad or whether I'm just, really, really sleepy. My face is can be characterized as being a mask. I often think I'm behind a mask. And what I would say is that I think especially when you're meeting new people for the first time, it's really hard to break the ice because they will smile and they will expect you to smile back. And when you just look blank, they'll go, "Well, he's a bit standoffish, isn't he? He's not very nice to talk to. Maybe he hasn't understood what I said." So I'm always quite open in explaining to people what my disability is, where my strengths lies, or where my strength lies, where my weaknesses are, because I think it's important that I want to be treated like everybody else. I don't want to be made a special case, and I don't think anyone with a disability wants charity. We just want a level playing field.
No, that makes sense, definitely. And actually, I remember you saying to me how the advent of emojis has been really fantastic for you.
Yeah. So when I'm happy, or when my wife and I are sending messages to each other. So actually, my wife has the same rare condition as I have. We got married in the States a couple of 3 years ago, actually. And I'm always using emojis to show people how I feel because I think they're awesome and they get the point across, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, Rena, I think it came up in a conversation with us as well, how helpful emojis are, particularly for yourself, even before the pandemic, working remotely, to be able to gauge what people were, people's intentions with written communication.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to struggle a lot with kind of facial expressions and body language, but also kind of written intentions, and emojis. I use them a lot personally to get my feelings across to someone else, to make sure that what I'm writing, because I know I can be very direct because of my autism, I tend to use them to indicate, oh yeah, I'm joking, or this is a funny thing, or something like that, to make sure that other people get the same message that I'm sending.
Definitely. I've been reading a book about digital communication, and there's lots in there around punctuation, emojis, and all sorts of things. And also, and actually, from if you're working remotely and you're trying to maintain good working relationships with everyone, things like that can just reduce anxiety levels and build trust, can't they?
Yeah, I'd say the same. I having been originally a bit sniffy about them, I rely on emojis all the time now, and it's quite often, as both Alex and Rena have said, to get that emotion across. You know, I'm joking. I don't have to worry about the fact that that was misunderstood, or if it gets misunderstood, you can say something. I put the smiley after it. You know, how can you think I wasn't joking? That's universal now.
But it's true, isn't it? And it's just sort of slipped into our lives, and we'd be lost without them now, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's anything in the Q&A that we ought to be picking up on. It's looking quite busy in there. So we have Rebecca asked, I do apologise, I should have explained what a keyboard trap was when I was talking about them. So some people navigate websites and so on just using the keyboard because they're unable to use a mouse for one reason or another, and lots of assistive technology also works off of keyboard shortcuts. But a keyboard trap is when a website's not been designed to work with keyboard and actually your cursor gets stuck somewhere. So and it for some devilish reason, it often seems to happen just at the moment when you want to complete a purchase, or, you know, isn't it? It's controls and buttons seem to be where it happens. And obviously it's very excluding, but if you don't design your website and check it for keyboard accessibility, it does often happen. And somebody's also said, can you describe what a talk track is as opposed to audio description? So the video I was describing was one of those where, you know, people just have almost like a subtitle that's saying what the meaning is to be conveyed, but no one's speaking it, and there's just music playing. And it seems to be a sort of a trend in marketing videos, doesn't it? And actually, obviously, if you're visually impaired and that's happening, then all you can hear is the music. And if there's no one reading out those captions, I hope that helps. What else did we have? So someone is asking, this is a really good question, actually. How much can I, as an employer, ask you about what you need to succeed, and how to frame that? I guess this worrying about saying the wrong thing. What do people think?
I would much rather you ask me in the worst language that you can think of, rather than don't ask me. I know that sounds really, really bad, but I think the point I'm trying to make is, I wouldn't mind if someone said, "Oh, I know you've got different hands. How can we help you?" I wouldn't mind that. You're asking, and it's okay just to be really, really what's the word?
Direct.
Or direct, or not politically correct in your language. As long as you're asking me, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
It's not asking that's the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think we sorry, Rena, go on.
I was just going to say, I totally shadow that, you know, as someone who has a diagnosis of autism, I'm very upfront about my diagnosis. And a lot of people think autism, you can't do this or you can't do that. Autism affects each person individually, first of all, but also, you know, how do you know what I can do and what I can't if you haven't even asked me? So just like Alex said, you know, even if there's nothing, if you don't know what to say, you have absolutely no idea, it's literally just asking the question in any words that you can think of is better than not saying it at all.
I think that's so true. We were speaking to, I think it was some training that we were having, and a lady said she worked in sort of HR law, so dealing with quite a lot of you know, tribunal cases and complaints and so on. And actually the main reason that they got for complaining wasn't people being bullied or picked on, but actually they're saying they felt ignored. And that really stayed with me, you know, that they felt it's a bit of a buzzword, but othered and out from the crowd sort of thing. Somebody asking you, Rena, do you feel able and empowered to tell your colleagues when enough is enough and you're experiencing overload?
So this is one of the things that I've come to learn to do. You know, there were times where I would try and keep it all to myself. And I remember I was working at a supermarket quite a few years ago, about 7 years ago, and I wasn't open with any of the kind of difficulties or adjustments that I needed, and I ended up having a complete meltdown at work, crying in the toilets, and nobody knew what was happening, nobody knew what was wrong. And I think I ended up taking about a month or two off from work. And I've come to the point where I'm just like, well, if you want, whether you want to hear it or not, you're going to get it. And for me, that's a really important part of you know, who I am. I have to be honest with myself. And if I'm going to sustain full-time work for any period of time, I've got to be honest with the people that I'm working with, whether they want it or not.
Definitely. And I think, again, in the same way, that taking that very courageous decision on your part then makes it easy to stick with that, doesn't it? It's when you first take that step to actually say, yeah, this is how I'm going to communicate, and it is what it is.
It's kind of getting past that fear that if you say something, then, you know, someone will think you can't ever do it, or if you say something, then you people will stop giving you work to do or anything like that. But I kind of take the view that, you know, if I don't say something, I will lose my job, whether it's through me quitting or me completely failing to sustain my responsibilities. And it's kind of being honest and saying, you know, okay, this is something that I can't necessarily deal with now, but it might be something that I'd be able to do in the future after some practice or shadowing or whatever.
And on the flip side, you know, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you've progressed more quickly than any accessibility consultant, more or less, within AbilityNet. You've come in and you've flown. So that strategy is definitely working out well for AbilityNet as well.
Yeah.
And I do think managers really value someone coming to them and saying, look, I want to flag up, I've got an issue. So, for example, I hate thunderstorms. I hate the humidity, I hate the thunder, it really hurts my ears. So I've been quite honest in saying, boss, that if there's a thunderstorm nearby, I'll have my headphones in, I'll need to go and wander around or whatever. I think it stems from being in the scouts and being out in a storm in a tent. But I've never managed to get over them. Now it's irrational. But the bosses always said, thanks for coming and letting us know.
Yeah.
And I think bosses really want you to be approachable and say, if there's an issue, I want to know about it.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Shall we move on to our next? We really wanted to touch on technology here, and this is something that we go into in the training series we're talking about. Technology is a real enabler to remove barriers. So I just wanted to go around the table and hear about your single most impactful assistive technology or tech tool that makes a difference to the way you work or learn. So shall we start with you, Alex?
Okay, this is going back to the 80s, but as soon as I got a word processor, not a computer, a word processor, I knew that I could get my work done. I didn't need to turn in pieces of work that I had to be embarrassed about because I was writing. That's it. As long as I could produce my own work, I knew that I could put in high quality work. Yeah. and that was a real game changer.
Amazing. Yeah. How about you, Adam?
Just finding the mute again. For me, it's probably going to be to-do lists, just as a way of prioritizing work. I like particularly Microsoft's To-Do, just because it links in with so many other bits and pieces. So flagged email will go into that. I hate email.
Had a bit of a horror this morning, didn't you, coming back from holiday to 450 emails?
Yes, that was a little bit of a shock. Luckily, about 400 of them were junk, so that was okay. Yeah, so to-do lists, and also things that from a kind of purely mental health perspective, things like focus modes, screen time, that sort of thing, anything that allows me to track usage or that will kind of give me a little bit of a nudge to stop using a device, or, you know, that sort of thing, to bring my focus back into what I need to be doing rather than being distracted by other things that I don't need to be.
Makes sense. Yeah, all those notifications can just be like, ooh, up a gear, up a gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Rena?
I think my biggest piece of technology that I don't necessarily use it a lot, but it makes the most difference to me in my ability to work, communicate, study, all of those different things, is definitely voice recognition. So it means that if my dyslexia is playing up and I can't produce the words through my fingers, through writing or through kind of typing or whatever, I can speak it. Or if my autism is playing up and I can't get the words out in the right order, at least I can then get the words out. Or if my pain in my hands is playing up, I can control my computer using my voice. It just, while I don't use it every day, I probably don't even use it every week, but it's the one thing that probably makes the biggest difference.
And it just frees you, like Alex, when he first was able to type rather than having to try to handwrite. It just, you know, and I think that's a really good point as well, Rena, is that you don't have to always use the technology for it to be hugely impactful when you do need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's talk about misconceptions and assumptions, because this can be a really big thing for everyone in a workplace or place of education, to be able to identify and challenge these. What sort of misconceptions do you hit up against? How about you, Alex? Anything that you've had to deal with where people are assuming something?
I guess because my face is paralysed, people don't really know whether I've understood what they said. And when I go into organisations, I guess there's always a misconception on their part that I'm not very happy, or I've come to complain, or something like that. I think when people, for a couple of years, I've been doing webinars for AbilityNet, and I tend to go on camera, and I can see people take a second, you know, like a second look, as if to say, "Oh, okay, what's wrong with his face?" And what I try to do is I always try to inject some humour into the webinars that I do and to the presentations that I do, because I want to get my personality over.
Yeah, well, you actually do some stand-up comedy as well, don't you?
Oh, I have done it in the past. Only once though, so I can't have been that good.
Well, you always keep us laughing, definitely.
But I am available for booking, so if people
exactly,
want to
yeah. Second show available when you want it. How about yourself, Rena?
I mean, there's so many that I can think of, and I mean, mostly around autism. So like similarly in interviews, you know, my nervousness, my anxiety can stop me from making eye contact. People can think I'm not interested, that I don't really care. That's not it. My interest is not indicated by staring into two jelly balls in your head. So why does it matter? but for some people it does, and it doesn't make any sense to me, but there you go. But I mean, another one is literalism. It doesn't necessarily mean that I always take everything that someone says absolutely literally. You know, most of the time I'm able to self-filter. My what I call my autistic answers get stopped before they get to my mouth. I say a sensible answer or something like that, but sometimes I fail. But like one time at the weekend, I was talking to someone and I was talking about selling something, and they said, "What are you going to sell it for?" And because I'm quite stressed at the moment, I went, "Money." And they're like, "No, but how much?" And I'm like, "But you asked what I'm selling it for, and I'm selling it for money." But then another example is like the opposite way round. So I was at one of my friends' houses with a group of friends, and one of them, there was a piece of pepperoni pizza left on the table, and I said, "Does anyone want the pepperoni?" And one of my friends went, "Oh yes, please." So I went to scrape the pepperoni off the piece of pizza, and they went, "Oh no, I thought you meant the slice of pizza." I was like, "Well, no, if I meant the slice of pizza, I would have said the slice of pepperoni pizza." But I don't like pepperoni, but I want the slice of pizza.
Win-win.
But it's things like that just, you know, it's just about kind of appreciating that literalism is a thing, and kind of just taking that into account when you communicate with someone. I mean, the last one, I'm going to shut up in a minute. But the last one is just autism. It's like people have a stereotypical picture of autism. I do my uni exams at home, and I once had an invigilator who came to watch the exam say, "Oh, you don't look autistic." And I kind of stood there and went, "What am I supposed to look like?" You know, my diagnosis doesn't mean that I can't do something or that I should look a particular way. It just means I need to do it in a different way. And that kind of assumption that my diagnosis means that I can or can't do something or should or shouldn't look a particular way is just like, it blows my mind. Why? There is no need for it.
Yeah, no, totally. And I don't think you're alone in hearing that. Adam found some great videos recently about language, and it definitely came up. "You don't look deaf" was another one, wasn't it, Adam?
What are they supposed to look like?
Don't know. So Adam, how about yourself on misconceptions and assumptions?
I think, again, it goes back to what I was saying about the kind of the assumptions that I could or couldn't do something because I was anxious about doing it. You know, I used to act, I used to do amateur dramatics, used to be in the village panto every year.
Awesome.
And I'd get nervous before that, and, you know, I'd still perform. And I think the same is true. I get a little bit of stage fright, but I can still do these things. I think in terms of pressurized situations as well, some meetings, when somebody asks me a direct question that I'm not ready for, I can go blank. And the moment I go blank, I have the voice that tells me everybody here thinks you shouldn't be here. It's the imposter syndrome that you were talking about. You know, if you can't answer that, then you shouldn't be doing this job. They're going to get rid of you as soon as they hang up, sort of thing. And it's that. And the moment that starts, it's like a anxiety spiral. There's absolutely no way out of it.
And the worst thing is 2 seconds before, you probably had something really insightful to say. Yeah, definitely.
The moment the camera goes off or the conversation goes somewhere else, I suddenly think, oh, that's what I should have said.
And that's where this sort of inclusive teamwork, inclusive meetings, and giving people fair warning that a question's coming, or giving people the opportunity to contribute before, after.
Well, you know, I might not feel comfortable coming off mute and saying something, but I'll type it in the chat because it gives me enough time to kind of formulate my thoughts. Definitely. Then I might be able to add to it, but it's nice to have that option.
So let's just touch on language now, because it's a really powerful aspect of the way disability differences and health conditions are perceived, but it is subjective and there's different terminology from one country to another, one person to another. I just wondered if any of you have any instances you can recall where language has impacted positively or negatively. Rena, have you got any examples?
So the big one that comes up with autism is how you say you have autism. I have autism. I am autistic. I am a person with autism. I am Aspi. Personally, I really don't care. Autism is part of me. I wouldn't be me without it, but I'm also more than just autism. But the thing is I know particularly in the autistic society, but probably also in kind of the other collections of people with specific diagnoses, they have, individual people have ways that they prefer to be referred to, or whether they want their diagnosis to be identified in that way or something like that. And the most simple way to get around that is just ask people, okay, so I need to explain this to someone else. How would you prefer me to refer to you and your diagnosis when I explain it to someone else? So, that might be in a work meeting, and they have to go to, your manager has to go to talk to HR, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is about communication, isn't it?
Yeah,
definitely.
And I mean, I was once in a workplace, and this is kind of separate, but I was once I was doing like a work placement, and the manager I reported to in the diversity and equality newsletter, or it was something like that, was congratulated for taking on a disabled intern. I'm like, I'm not a burden. I'm a person. Treat me exactly how you would treat someone else. Even if you just do away with the disabled part, that's fine. It's like, nobody needs to be congratulated for taking me on because I'm disabled. It's just like, I mean, also, I hate the word disabled. I am not disabled. I am different. I work differently. But unfortunately, that word has to be used to get the support that I need. And it irks me, but it's a fact of life, really.
Yeah, and I think definitely, I think when we talk to students, when we're doing disabled student allowances type outreach to let people know about disabled students allowance, a lot of people don't connect with that at all. They're much more aligned with a condition or a difference or something along those lines. But yeah, I guess it's that whole grouping, and we're never going to solve it, are we? But I think the main thing is to just keep talking about it, definitely.
And ask people what they want.
Yeah,
they want to be called, I guess.
Exactly.
It's like, you wouldn't go up to someone and say, hi, Jane, before you know their name.
Yeah.
So why would you go up and why would you talk to someone and say you are autistic when they prefer person with autism,
Definitely. So we're the time is ticking along. I think, shall we put up the Slido now to invite people to ask any questions they've got that they might like to raise anonymously? I think we've probably got lots in the chat as well that we've been going through so far. So what we're going to do is try and wrap all of these questions up that we haven't managed to get to. We'll answer some of them with the recording that's circulated. We'll do like a blog with some of the question responses, and we'll also try and fold them into the longer, more in-depth training sessions that we're going to be running. So has anyone seen anything in the chat? I'm just going to have a look through the Q&A and see if I can spot anything. I will get that book reference out to everybody. In that, I can't even remember the lady's surname. This is my brain freezing. Erica Dewan. Anyway, I will send that without a doubt with the recording.
There's one here from Desmond. How would you want a manager to check in that you're okay without being a pain? So from my perspective, there was a mental health charity that did an advert recently about asking twice. So if somebody says they're okay, ask again. Are you really okay? But at a certain point, you do have to say that you've opened yourself up for somebody to talk to you, and that there is an element of that's as much as you really can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get asked, am I okay? And I might say yes, and somebody might say, you sure? And I'll say, yep, that's fine. I don't want to talk about anything. If I'm coming across, then I apologize, but I'm okay. And then that's enough, move on.
Yeah. Someone said here, how can, sorry, Alex.
No, ladies first. Go on, Amy.
Oh no, I was jumping on to another question. So
okay.
yeah.
So well, one of the questions that I've just seen in here is there an organisation to get a diagnostic assessment from an anonymous attendee as I have symptoms, etc., and always thought about it for a few years as I struggled in uni and ended up leaving after a year. There are lots of organisations that can give you a formal diagnosis. Normally, it is at a cost. We always advise people to go and talk to their GP, but we do appreciate that there will be quite a long wait. But if you have it, say for example, if you have it in your head that you may be dyslexic, for example, go and have a talk to the dyslexic organisations like Dyslexia Acts and just seek their advice about whether a formal diagnosis is useful.
There's some really interesting, we will share a lot of people with things resonating that the panel have said about being able to stand up in front of 300 people and talk, but struggling to find the right thing to say in a social setting. Adam, someone was saying, someone with ADHD saying that their smartwatch has just been transformational in terms of organising. It's amazing how these technologies can just become a huge part of how you can function. Let's see here.
Am I still sharing? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
My screen.
What are your best experiences of inclusive workplaces? That's a nice one to finish on. What's the, you know, when it's a great day at work, what does that mean to you guys?
My line manager on annual leave.
That's me. Charmed.
Go on, Alex.
I was going to say payday, but it's all about feeling that you're valued in a team and getting the job done.
Yeah,
for me.
That's
so, Rena.
I think for me, it's most noticeable when, you know, when I've tried to do something new and I've gone, okay, this is really hard for me, and the point at which I'm at with my personal life, with the things I'm doing at work right now, this is too much. And when my line manager goes, okay, that's fine, and I say, okay, so I'm not saying I will never do this. I'm saying that right now this can't be added into the mix of the million things that I'm trying to do. And they go, okay, we'll leave it for a bit. We won't do that piece of work for now, but we'll look at it again, you know, in a few months, in a year, something like that. And just that level of flexibility and understanding. It doesn't require my manager to feel the feelings I'm feeling or totally understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. It just requires them to kind of hear what I'm saying and understand that I know myself best, and be flexible and appreciate that and work with that rather than against it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How about you, Adam? Other than when I'm on my jolly holidays.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a joke.
I don't mind. I'll go on holiday every day.
I mean, I think I do genuinely, it's going to seem a bit cheesy, but I do think AbilityNet really do try and get it right. I think that's part of it, that they try and get it right, but they don't always. We don't always get it right, but we've created an environment where it's okay to get things wrong and to learn from that. And I think that's really important in terms of, it's a big learning curve for all of us. How you might deal, or how I might want to be dealt with, is different from how other people might want to be dealt with. There's not a fixed standard that you can really refer to. So actually just being open to saying, okay, that didn't work for you, that works for me, not for you, and being able to say, that didn't help me. So just having that kind of open conversation with people and creating an environment that's inclusive, in that people are communicating, that is really important.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we're going to have to move on now. We're really getting to the end of the session. So just to sort of wrap up what we've discussed, I think, it really is, accessibility is very much about people, and stories and discussing like we have been today really helps to properly understand barriers and get people to see the importance of following, standards and so on, to make sure that websites are accessible and working processes are welcoming for everyone. Obviously, language is something that evolves, but it has great power, and we need to keep talking about why we want to use positive language about disability and accessibility. And lastly, I think everyone in every workplace or every walk of life needs to call out assumptions and misconceptions in a gentle and pleasant way, but we've all got a role to play in being an accessibility ally for each other. So just before we go, I wanted to share the dates for the more in-depth training sessions we're going to be running. Hope to see some of you for those, and there's some discount codes available for bundles of courses. For anyone who can't make those sessions or would like us to run a session for your team or as a group, do get in touch. Also, did you know we've got e-learning options? These come again from a person-centered perspective, zoning in on different sort of categories of conditions and disabilities, providing practical tips and information on how to create an inclusive, accessible working or learning environment. So they're quite good when you want to get to a larger audience, and they're a really useful reference point to return to refresh your memory about different things. So if anyone would like a demo of those, do get in touch. So it looks like 2 p.m. is almost upon us. Thank you so much, everyone. As we say, I think we're going to have a super interesting blog coming out of this, with all the questions that we've got that we weren't able to tackle today. We've also got some other webinars coming up. If you want to keep track of what we're up to, sign up for our newsletter at abilitynet.org.uk/newsletter, and we'll let you know when those webinars are up for registration. But thanks so much to everybody, and thanks so much to our wonderful panel for giving up your time today to come along and discuss with everybody. We'll say cheerio, shall we? Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.